I didn't pass out because I was weak. I passed out because staying conscious had become a luxury I could no longer afford. People think exhaustion announces itself slowly, a heavy yawn, a drooping eyelid, a warning you can catch before it becomes a crisis. They're wrong. Exhaustion doesn't knock. It waits until you've spent every last coin of willpower you have, and then it takes the rest of you without asking. I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things that year. I grabbed a patient chart off the counter, forced my spine straight, and made myself walk, not stagger, walk toward the emergency department. If I looked steady, I was steady. That had always been the rule. That was when I saw her. Dr. Nora Hayes didn't so much enter a room as reorganize it. She never raised her voice to command attention. She simply looked at you, and something in the quiet certainty of her gaze made everyone straighten without meaning to. We'd spoken maybe a dozen times in the 2 years I'd worked under her, brief, clipped, entirely professional. Orders given, orders followed, nothing more. But that night across the length of the corridor, her eyes found mine and they didn't let go. She crossed the distance in a handful of strides, her jaw tight, a muscle ticking there that I'd never noticed before. "Mia, when did you last sleep?" "I'm fine, doctor." The lie came out smooth, automatic, the same one I'd been feeding everyone for weeks. "I have patience." "There's a difference," she said, her voice dropping low, "between responsibility and destroying yourself." Her eyes moved over my face, really looked, the way no one had in longer than I could remember, and something in her expression flickered, softened, sharpened again. "Eat something, that's an order." Before I could answer, an alarm tore down the hallway, sharp and insistent. Nora turned without a word and ran toward the trauma bay, white coat snapping behind her like a flag. I watched her go and felt something tighten in my chest that had no business being there. I didn't have room in my life for feelings. I barely had room for sleep. 20 minutes later, the hallway tilted for real. The metal tray in my hands hit the floor with a crash loud enough to make my own ears ring. My knees folded. I remember bracing for the cold shock of linoleum, and then I remember not hitting it. Strong arms caught me instead, pulling me hard against a chest that smelled faintly of antiseptic and something warmer underneath it. "Oh, Mia." Her voice was the last thing I heard before the world went dark. "You're staying here," she said before I'd even managed to push the blanket down. "I have to work." "You collapsed." Her voice cracked on the word just slightly, just enough that I heard it. She stood, arms crossed tight over her chest like she was holding herself together by force. "You scared me, Mia." The words landed heavier than they should have, hanging in the quiet of the room like something neither of us knew how to put down. Nora looked away first, almost as if she were furious at herself for having said it at all. Before I could ask what that meant, before I could let myself wonder if she meant me, my phone buzzed against the bedside table. My brother. A reminder about his tuition deadline tomorrow in bold red letters. Panic closed around my throat like a fist. "I'll handle it," I whispered into the phone, eyes shut, willing my voice not to shake. When I hung up, Nora was watching me with an expression I couldn't name, something between pity and understanding, and neither of those were things I wanted from her. "How much do you need?" she asked simply. "I don't need your charity." My pride came up fast, sharp-edged, the only armor I had left. She didn't flinch. She stepped closer instead, and her thumb brushed a loose strand of hair from my face with a gentleness that undid something in me I'd spent years keeping locked. The touch lingered, warm and careful, her fingers barely grazing my skin as if she were afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing had just formed between us. Her face was inches from mine now. For one unbearable second, her gaze dropped to my mouth, and my heart slammed against my ribs like something trying to break free. The air between us felt charged, heavy with everything neither of us was supposed to want. Then her phone chimed, shattering the moment into pieces. Nora stepped back so fast it was almost violent, clearing her throat, color rising in her cheeks. "Go home, rest, that's a directive." 10 minutes after she left, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Stay away from Dr. Hayes. You don't know what happened to the last woman she tried to save." My stomach dropped. A second text landed before I could process the first. "Look in the file in her office desk. You aren't her patient, Mia, you're her assignment." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, and somewhere underneath the fear, a colder question took root. What if it was true? I spent the next 2 weeks running from her. Then Dr. Priya Shah cornered me in the break room, and the running stopped whether I wanted it to or not. She dropped a thick folder onto the counter between us, the sound of it flat and final. My name was printed on the tab in bold black ink, and the sight of it made my stomach twist. "Administration is opening a formal investigation into Dr. Hayes," Priya said, her voice carefully level, the kind of calm that costs effort. "Favoritism, schedule tampering, unprofessional conduct. Someone filed an anonymous report." My hands weren't steady when I opened the folder. Inside were timestamps of every shift Nora had quietly rearranged for me, every observation note she'd personally signed off on, and worse, a candid photograph of me asleep in the observation room, with Nora standing guard at the door like she had nowhere else in the world she needed to be. Beneath the photo, someone had written in handwriting I didn't recognize, "Mia Carter, keep an eye on her." "If this goes to the board," Priya said, watching my face carefully, "your license gets suspended right along with her career. Distance yourself, now." I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing that photograph, the tenderness in it, the way it had been turned into a weapon without either of us knowing. That evening, Nora caught me at the hospital exit. Rain was coming down in sheets, catching the ambulance bay's neon glow and scattering it across the wet pavement like something out of a dream I didn't have the right to want. "Why are you doing this to me?" she demanded, catching my wrist, gently, always gently, even now. Her eyes were bloodshot, the composure I'd never once seen crack now fully shattered. "You're slipping away, Mia, talk to me." "Because you're ruining my life." The words tore out of me before I could stop them, and the lie tasted like poison the second it left my mouth. "Look at the files, Nora, people are watching us. I can't lose this job, my brother has no one else." She flinched like I'd hit her. "You think I did all of this to control you?" "I think you made a mistake." My voice broke on the last word, tears mixing with the rain running down my face. "We were a mistake." For a long moment, Nora stood perfectly still under the dim light, water soaking through her coat, her jaw working like she was swallowing something too large to get down. Then she nodded once, slow and final. "Okay," she said softly. She turned and walked into the rain, and I let her go, hating myself with every step she took away from me. The next morning, I was summoned to the chief of medicine's office. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else the entire walk there. Priya was already inside when I arrived, her face pale, an official resignation letter sitting on the desk between us like a verdict. "Dr. Hayes submitted a full confession this morning," the chief said without preamble. "She's taken sole responsibility for every administrative irregularity in that file, cleared your name completely, and resigned her position as attending physician effective immediately." My heart stopped. She took the fall. I didn't ask permission to leave. I turned and ran, sprinting through corridors I'd walked 1,000 times without ever really seeing them, taking the stairwell 3 steps at a time until I burst through the heavy rooftop doors, lungs burning, heart pounding harder than it had the night I collapsed. Nora was standing near the edge, her coat whipping in the wind, staring out over a skyline she didn't seem to be seeing at all. "Nora," I gasped, doubling over to catch my breath. She didn't turn around. "You shouldn't be up here, Mia. You ruined your career for me." My voice cracked as I closed the distance, gravel wet and uneven beneath my feet. "Why would you do that?" She turned then, and the raw, unguarded pain on her face stole what was left of my breath. "Because I couldn't let them destroy your future just because I fell in love with you." The wind seemed to still. I stared at her, tears spilling over before I could stop them. "You love me." "I loved you the second you told me being broke was worse than being exhausted," she said, her voice fracturing on every word. "I loved how fiercely you fought for your family, even while you were falling apart trying to hold it together. I couldn't save the people in my past, Mia, but I was never going to let the system crush you too." Something inside me finally broke open. I crossed the last of the distance between us, framed her face with both hands, and kissed her. It wasn't careful, it wasn't polite. It was weeks of fear and longing crashing together at once. Nora's arms locked around my waist, pulling me flush against her until there was no space left between us. I could feel the heat of her body through our coats, the rapid thud of her heart matching mine. Her mouth moved against mine with a quiet urgency that made my knees weaken. One of her hands slid up my back, steadying me, while the other cupped the nape of my neck, fingers threading into my hair like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. For the first time in longer than I could remember, the constant noise in my head, the numbers, the deadlines, the exhaustion went silent. There was only her, the soft sound she made against my lips, the way her breath hitched when I pressed closer, the quiet, almost desperate way she held me as if she had been waiting years for permission to do exactly this. When she finally pulled back, resting her forehead against mine, both of us were breathing hard. A soft, breathless laugh escaped her. "I thought you said we were a mistake." "I lied," I whispered, brushing another soft kiss against the corner of her mouth, then the tip of her nose. I was terrified. Her eyes searched mine, dark and shining. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind tugged at our clothes, but neither of us moved away. Her thumb traced the line of my jaw with aching gentleness, and I leaned into the touch like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Her phone rang in her pocket. She glanced at the screen inside. "It's Priya." She answered and put it on speaker without hesitation. "Mia's with you, isn't she?" Priya's voice came through, breathless, almost laughing. Listen, I found out who sent the anonymous reports and the texts. It was the head of department scheduling. He'd been skimming budget funds and tried to use Nora's shift adjustments to cover his tracks. Nora's hand tightened around mine and the board's. The board dismissed the investigation entirely, Priya said, warmth flooding her voice. Nora, your resignation was rejected, you're staying, and Mia, your permanent contract just got approved. I let out a shaky laugh and buried my face against Nora's neck, holding on like I finally had something worth holding on to. You're free, Mia, she murmured into my hair, arms firm around me against the cold wind. No more running. Only if you stay beside me, I said, tipping my head back to meet her eyes. Nora smiled, a real one, slow and radiant, warming the whole gray rooftop around us. Always, she said, you're still under my care. The wind on the hospital rooftop was freezing, but standing in Nora's arms, I had never felt warmer. Priya's voice had barely faded from the speaker of Nora's phone, and yet the silence that followed felt enormous, the kind of quiet that only comes after something has finally, truly ended. The investigation was over. The head of scheduling had been exposed for exactly what he was. My job was safe, and Nora wasn't leaving. Not the hospital, not me. I kept waiting for the fear to come rushing back in, the way it always had these past few weeks, some new catastrophe waiting just behind the good news, ready to take it away. But it didn't come. There was only the wind and the city lights spread out beneath us and Nora's heartbeat steady under my ear. Did you hear that? Nora murmured, her thumb brushing a stray tear from my cheek with a tenderness that still felt unfamiliar, like a language I was only beginning to learn. Your contract is permanent, Mia. You don't have to break yourself anymore. I let out a breathless laugh, my chest rising and falling against hers. I don't think I know how to stop working, Nora. It's the only thing I've ever been good at not failing. Then let me teach you, she whispered. She leaned down, and this time when her lips found mine, there was none of the fear that had kept us circling each other for weeks. No stolen glance over a shoulder, no flinch at the sound of a passing footstep. Just the slow, unhurried certainty of two people who had finally run out of reasons to be afraid. The kiss deepened gradually. Nora's hand settled at my waist, firm and warm, guiding me closer until I was fully in her arms. I slid my fingers into the soft hair at the back of her neck, feeling the way she shivered under the touch. Every careful press of her mouth against mine felt like a promise. Every quiet inhale between us felt like something long held back finally being allowed to breathe. When we parted, she didn't step away. She stayed close, forehead still resting against mine, one hand splayed protectively across my lower back as if she needed the constant reminder that I was real and here and not going anywhere. You're still under my care, she said softly, the words carrying a new weight now, not just professional but something deeper, more permanent. I smiled against her lips, then I guess I'll have to get used to following doctor's orders. Her quiet laugh vibrated through both of us. She pressed one last lingering kiss to the corner of my mouth before finally taking my hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. When we finally came back down from the roof, the hospital felt like a different building entirely. The fluorescent lights that had always seemed too harsh, too clinical, didn't sting the same way. The endless hum of monitors, the rush of footsteps down every hallway, none of it felt like a countdown to my own collapse anymore. It just felt like a place I worked, a place I could, maybe, even like again. As the elevator doors slid open, Priya was already waiting near the main desk, a paper cup of coffee in one hand that had clearly gone cold an hour ago. She looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that comes from doing the right thing under pressure, but when her eyes met ours, something in her face eased, and a small, genuine smile broke through. Dr. Hayes, Mia, she crossed the floor to meet us, holding out a sleek blue folder. The board officially cleared your record 10 minutes ago, full reinstatement, no conditions. The scheduling department goes under a complete audit starting tomorrow morning. Nora took the folder without looking at it, her eyes still faintly red from the rooftop. 10 minutes, she repeated quietly, like she was testing whether the words were real. I pushed it through myself, Priya said, least I could do. I stepped forward before I could second-guess it, my voice thick. Priya, thank you for looking into the files, for not letting it go even when it would have been easier to. Priya shook her head, and for a moment the composed, clinical mask she always wore slipped just slightly. I owe you both an apology, honestly. I was so focused on protecting this hospital's reputation that I almost let a quiet predator destroy two of our best people to do it. That's on me. Her gaze softened as it landed on me. You're a resilient nurse, Mia, stubborn to a fault but resilient. We're lucky to keep you. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer that, so I just nodded, throat tight. Nora inclined her head toward Priya, a small, quiet gesture, professional on the surface but carrying something warmer underneath it, the kind of understanding that passes between two people who have spent years in the same trenches. Thank you, Priya, for all of it. Don't thank me yet, Priya said, already turning to go, coffee cup in hand. You've got a full audit to survive tomorrow, and I expect at least one of you to actually sleep tonight. She threw a pointed look over her shoulder at me as she disappeared down the corridor, and despite everything, I laughed. Once she was gone, Nora turned to face me fully, her dark eyes catching the fluorescent light with that familiar mix of warmth and stubborn, unshakable authority that I'd once mistaken for coldness, and now understood was just how deeply she cared. Your shift ended 2 hours ago, she noted, arms crossing over her chest. I know, I said, smiling despite the exhaustion still sitting heavy behind my eyes. And you have 3 days of mandatory rest before your new schedule starts. That's not a suggestion. Is that an official medical recommendation, doctor? I asked, stepping closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her even through the hospital's ever-present chill. It's a non-negotiable directive, Nora said softly, reaching for my hand and lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world, from someone who loves you. The words still landed like a small shock every time she said them, like I hadn't quite gotten used to being someone worth saying them to. For the first time since I'd stepped foot in this.